Hello everyone, my name is Reed and welcome to Storytime. Today we're going to be reading some Choosing Beggars stories, so sit back, relax, and enjoy. Jailbird uncle demands more monthly money, is denied the increase, sues his brother, loses in court, now gets nothing. Bit of a long one for y'all. Just a bit of background. My uncle has been in jail off and on for probably 3/4 of my life, and I'll be 40 this year. Usually it was just pure idiocy that landed him behind bars once he broke into a house and fell asleep on their couch. Another time it was something like public drunkenness in Utah on a non-drinking day or something. At that point I wasn't paying attention to what exactly landed him in jail. It was just an, oh, uncle is in jail again and move on with life thing. But this last time, he got drunk and beat a man almost to death, sentence 20 years. Other random facts that come into play. Uncle has 2 kids. Uncle was divorced, but failed to pay child support, so had a huge child support bill due. That child support bill? If Uncle ever had too much money at once, because his money was watched by the prison system, it could be seized to repay back the child support. That child support bill? If Uncle ever had too much money at once, because his money was watched by the prison system, it could be seized to repay the back child support. Anyway, on to the long story. This went on for about a decade, so a few things might be out of order, but all the key parts are there. So it's the late zeros, and the uncle is already in prison for beating this dude. Then my grandfather on that side, who'd previously been subsidizing my uncle in prison, had a stroke, and for a few days it was pretty touch and go. My dad flies out, and it's obvious that if Grandpa lives, he's going to have to go into a nursing home. Grandpa's sister and my dad are there and decide that they need Grandpa to get his will together. They have an attorney come to the hospital and the will gets written, witnessed, etc. Now, yes, Grandpa had just had a stroke, but his mind was still fully there. His mind was good until the day he died. At this point, I have to break to mention 2 things. 1, Grandpa owed Dad about $20,000, so the will was structured to treat that as separate somehow. And number 2, Grandpa told Dad not to give my uncle money in prison. Anyway, in the will, my grandpa left everything to my dad. Nothing to the grandchildren, this comes up later, and nothing to my uncle. My dad and Grandpa's sister actually asked about my uncle, and Grandpa replied that he'd bailed him out of jail so many times, even adding an extra mortgage once if I recall, and sent him so much spending money for prison that in his eyes, my uncle had already received his inheritance. Now, we were still on speaking terms with Uncle after Grandpa's stroke, but even though he was told not to, my dad started sending the monthly spending money, which I believe was $50 then, and after a couple years went up to $75. A year later, Grandpa passed. We called the prison to let Uncle know, and in a subsequent letter, he was informed that there was nothing for him in the will. My parents did put a token amount into a bond for him anyway. About 3 years passed, during which time my parents continued to send a monthly stipend to my uncle. Then Uncle calls with some excuse for why he needs more money. My parents call BS and tell him that they're not sending anything extra. Uncle gets pushier, and my parents finally tell them that they'll cash out the bond they set aside for him. But then there'll be nothing for him when he gets out. Uncle takes the money, but still demands an increase in his monthly amount. He's once again told no, he's getting free money, and if he needs more, he should get a job in the prison. At some point around this time, one of my cousins died. The other died a couple years later. Uncle argues that cousin's inheritance should revert to him, arguing that Grandpa had to have left some money to his precious grandchildren, neglecting the fact that none of the grandchildren were even included, and even if they were, it would have been paid out years earlier. When my parents send ex-aunt money to help with funeral costs, Uncle is mad because he thinks that money should have gone to him for grieving or something. Fast forward several months. There have been rumblings of Uncle demanding money from other people we know, which is making everybody mad. But this is the way he operates, and everybody's a tiny bit forgiving because his eldest kid just died. Then, ex-aunt forwards us a letter in which Uncle asks her to lie for him and state that there was a previous will by my grandparents that included him. There wasn't. At the same time, we're notified that Uncle is suing my parents, contesting Grandpa's will, and demanding almost 5 times the amount of the entire inheritance. Note, he was able to claim indigent status, so filing fees and such were waived. It's at this point my parents cut him off, pretty sure that their own money has been used to buy favors in prison that helped Uncle put together the lawsuit. Now, the lawsuit was full of ridiculous allegations, claiming that Grandpa had been coerced into making a new will while mentally weak due to the stroke, that my parents had abused my grandpa, that the estate was worth far more than it was because of antiques and such. Old doesn't mean valuable. That my parents were willfully withholding the contact information of family members who would back up his claims. Nope, they begged us not to give them their details because they knew he'd demand money, and as many lies as he thought he could get away with. Enter lawsuit number 1, filed in the state Grandpa lived in before his stroke, and where the will was written. It was quickly dismissed on jurisdiction grounds as Uncle didn't live there, my parents don't live there, and Grandpa didn't die there because my parents brought him to a nursing home in our state so he wouldn't have to be alone. Enter lawsuit number 2. About 9 months or so after lawsuit number 1, Uncle refiled in the state he's incarcerated in. This time it wasn't quickly tossed on jurisdiction grounds, and parents had to get an out-of-state attorney. Eventually the case was dismissed, but without prejudice. Enter lawsuit number 3. Almost immediately after the case was tossed in the second state, he sues again in the state parents live and that Grandpa died in. Parents have to get an attorney again. This time, Uncle gets it in his head he'll win and drops the suit, expecting an amicable resolution because he's sick. But at this point, my parents are done and have been no contact for a while. My dad is ticked, and nope, there will be no amicable resolution because F the uncle and his crap. Enter lawsuit number 4. About 6 months after dropping lawsuit number 3, Uncle sues again. This one finally gets to court. A judge looks at everything, including threatening letters Uncle had sent and the letter he'd sent ex-aunt wanting her to lie about another will, etc., and the case is finally tossed with prejudice, meaning no refile. Uncle immediately appeals, but when that finally got to the appeals court, they tossed it pretty quickly. Now the sweet ending. Because all the family and friends watched the uncle run my parents through 4 different frivolous lawsuits because they refused to give him more money, almost everybody has cut ties, and last I heard, nobody was giving him any money at all. It's awesome that OP's parents were trying to, keep giving the uncle money even after the grandpa said no. It's honorable, but I'm glad they finally got fed up with it and put an end to it. They didn't want the free purebred dog I was giving away and got mad I gave her to someone else and accused me of breaking their daughter's heart. This was a couple of years ago now. My husband's aunt passed away after a short battle with congestive heart failure. We inherited her beloved Crapsu that she spoiled and doted on. Her boss even allowed aunt to take the dog to work every day, so this dog was not used to being alone. I'm a lawyer and he's a doctor, so we're not home during the day. And after the umpteenth time coming home to dog pee and crap everywhere because the dog was lonely and sad, we realized it wasn't working out. So I posted an ad for this free, purebred dog including dog food for a month, several toys, a bed, food bowls, doggy outfits, the works. I have a few caveats. Someone had to be home with the dog or take her to work because she gets bad separation anxiety, and she had to be the only animal in the home. She hated our cats and would bite them. So I got a number of offers to take her, and of course, almost none of them fit the 2 criteria I listed. One dude messaged me and said his daughter wanted a dog. He was a single dad and couldn't afford a purebred, and was interested, but also not really because his kid wanted a puppy and this dog was 4. So I tell him I have a potential buyer that was coming over at 5 and to make a decision if he wants to come meet the dog with his daughter. I don't hear back from the guy until 15 past 5, and the new buyer and her daughter had already fell in love with the dog and taken her away. I get the typical, well, message from single dad, and I told him basically, so sorry, too late. These people were sure they wanted her and loved on her, so I gave them the dog. I don't have the messages anymore, but I got a wall of texts cussing me out for wasting his time, how he had to wait for his kid to get out of school, which is why he didn't respond. All schools in our neighborhood get out between 2 and 3, and that it was too far away to bother meeting the dog before deciding whether he wanted her. He lived 4 miles away. Thanks for breaking my little girl's heart, you evil witch. Bonus, the Crapsu is super happy and sleeps on the buyer's bed every night, spends days with the grandma that lives there, and is very spoiled. Honestly, this situation worked out perfect because these people that were being all jerks and choosing beggars about the dog, they would have been terrible parents to the dog, so I'm glad the dog ended up with the right people. Choosy Beggar backs out of a deal because I won't reduce the price 70%. I now have to drive 240 kilometers to pick up my furniture. Significant other and I recently moved out of our flat. We were renting privately, so not from a large company. When we moved in, we were asked if we wanted to buy some furniture at a really good price by the previous tenants. As it already fit the flat, curtains, a coat rack, bathroom cabinets, you don't usually rent a place furnished where I live. We gave the landlord a list of items we'd like to sell to the next tenant, same as was given to us. We've added wall-to-wall carpet in one room, 2 huge, high-quality wardrobes, the flat doesn't have any closets, a freezer, and some other small items. We offered that they could buy everything for half the original price of the wardrobes. It didn't fit in our new house, so it was worth it for us to sell it at a low price rather than haul it all away. The new tenant came back with an offer that was 75% of the original price. We agreed because we sold a dresser while he was thinking about it. We had told him we had the things for sale and we wouldn't be holding them waiting for him to make up his mind. When he had the showing of the flat, the only things that were left in it was the things that were for sale, so he knew exactly what he was buying. We agreed on the price and I fell for the age-old, "Can I pay at the beginning of next month?" FML. He went and signed the contract this weekend and then wrote me that he'd only pay 40% of the agreed upon price, so a 70% decrease in total, because the items needed to be cleaned and were in poor condition. Both things are untrue, but I think he knew it'd be inconvenient for us to come pick them up, since we'd return our keys, so he decided to push it. Even if they were dirty and dingy, they hadn't changed since he saw them last and agreed upon the price. I wrote back that we'd pick up our furniture. We'll have to drive 240 kilometers to pick everything up. What a prick. Here's a good edit. Because I've explained the math poorly, we went from 100% of the original price to 75% of the original price. Then, a reduction from 100% of the reduced price to 40% of the reduced price. Honestly, I probably would have caved. I would not want to drive 240 kilometers, so I'm glad OP was able to stand their ground. My choosing beggar mom throws away the sundae I bought because the fudge wasn't hot. My mom keeps complaining about how poor she is and how she really wanted a sundae. So I went to McDonald's and got her one last night, but by the time I got back, she didn't want it and put it in the fridge. Tonight she says how much she wants one, so I tell her she still has the one in the fridge and she goes, "I don't want that one, the fudge is cold, and how am I supposed to eat a sundae if the fudge is cold?" The answer is, with a spoon. But whatever, her loss. I decide I'll have it later if she doesn't want it. So she ends up eating crushed tomatoes from a can, and I ask about the sundae and she tells me, "I threw it out because it's too cold and now I have to eat this because I'm too poor to get anything good." Please tell me I'm not going crazy. Alright, that's all the stories we have for today. If you liked what you heard, then subscribe for more content. And that's it, so have an amazing day. Goodbye.